Hi there, my name is Nick Dutch, and I think I'm just going to sit here and open up a can of worms. I want to talk about the subject of spell casting and prayer, which is more or less a synonymous phenomena anyway. The force of prayer or the force of spell casting or spiritual healing and the rest of it could actually just simply exist, full stop, finito. But the thing which gets in our way is the theoretical models we've got of understanding how the phenomenon itself works. The force of prayer, for instance, could easily exist. There was some reports of people being prayed for, and then, hey presto, their symptoms got a lot better. But then there was reports that after the time of praying had stopped, their symptoms basically got worse again. So that's been used as a justification to support the hypothesis that the power of prayer doesn't actually work, when essentially the force itself might still exist. It's just that our hypothetical or theoretical models as to how this particular force exists, or in what way it exerts itself, or how long it lasts, might actually be flawed to a certain degree. Also, we don't really have any knowledge as to precisely how these forces, if they do exist, actually have an impact upon reality. For instance, do they work on the cellular level? Do they provide some variety of increase in action potential of neurons? Do they provide some greater ability for fluids to move around within the cell walls? Do they interact with the very fabric of reality in its own right? These are questions that are still questions. But if we were to create any model of the world based upon the idea that these forces do actually exist, and they do actually exert a force upon the world, and hey presto, the results of any further investigation into the phenomena in question come up negative, all we can say is that the hypothetical model of the world which we previously had was not necessarily accurate under those specific circumstances. So we have to think carefully about the circumstances itself. We have to think carefully about in what way or in what degree the force actually has its effects, and under what circumstances. But of course, if we're dealing with something as complex as the human body and the human mind, are we ever going to be able to get that accurate and precise? That's very difficult to say. Maybe our current tools of analysis, even with EEG machines and MMR resonance scanners and all the rest of that, maybe it isn't quite good enough for me or anyone to be able to precisely pin down which forces are at work within the human being that could then have an impact upon the outside world. The idea of magic and miracles and the power of prayer has not been completely destroyed. What has been completely destroyed is certain specific varieties of claims based upon mythology, literature, or dogma throughout the history of humanity. That's basically what's been done, but only in some cases and only in some ways, and this is something we've got to basically remember. Some people could say that they have sufficient belief and faith that their car will take them from location A to location B because, it's happened before, and they try and drive from A to B and hey presto, the car breaks down halfway. Would they then stop believing in the power of the internal combustion engine, or would they stop believing in the power of the hydrocarbon fuel that was used to power the car? Well, obviously that would be completely false, because we've got further evidence and experience of the cars existing, of the engines existing, of the hydrocarbon fuel existing. So in that example it would be preposterous. But what if we had no other examples of cars, no other examples of the internal combustion engine, and no other examples of the fuel? There was still a hypothetical possibility that the other cars could exist, other engines could exist, and other forms of, and other fuels could exist, and indeed the fuels that we're talking about could exist. It's just that we don't know enough about them. The claims that something doesn't exist because we can't say anything about them is completely daft. It's pathetic. And the reason it's pathetic is because if something is unknown, then it remains unknown, and therefore you cannot make positive claims or negative claims about it. You can create hypothetical claims in one direction or another, and you can only try and back that up through further experimentation and exploration. I mean, if someone wants to be an atheist, then, if that makes you happy, then fine. If it is the case that gods, goddesses, angels, demons, and all the rest of it can still exist, but science can't say anything about them, you certainly can't discount the existence of either gods or goddesses or angels or demons, or indeed any other form of allegedly supernatural force that might possibly have some kind of hypothetical interaction with the world. It's just we can't say precisely what that form of interaction could be, under what circumstances it works, to what efficiency it works, the basic hows, whys, and wherefores. All we can do is to possibly undermine certain forms of interpretation about how these things do or do not exist. And that won't necessarily bring us closer to the truth. All that could do is to undermine certain schools of thought, not necessarily the objective existence of, let's say, the hypothetical force of prayer. Now, I still want to remain agnostic in my approach to all this weird stuff, because I just want to maintain my sanity. I don't want to become afraid, that would be totally ridiculous. So that's one of the reasons why I'm staying in this kind of like middle ground position. But if we don't know something, we can't make objective claims, positively or negatively. All we can do is say we can't know, and that happens from the atheist perspective, looking at spiritual and theological things, and from the point of view of the theological individual, looking at the phenomenon which the theological structure itself actually makes claims to. And this is something that both sides of the equation have got to remember. Nick Dutch signing out for now.